Good to see everyone here. I'm Laurence. I'm a steward at VitaDao in the Longevity Dealflow working group. I'll give a brief 10-minute intro about VitaDao, this funding collective you might have heard about, how we do it, why we do it, and then invite Vera Gorbunova and Morten Schabe-Knudsen to projects to give a 5-minute overview each of the research projects we're doing together, and leave time for an interactive Q&A, hopefully decentralize this conversation a little bit. So we are a new type of organization online, and we can do things in the real world. We want to create a world where longevity therapeutics are collectively funded, owned, and governed by the population that will benefit ultimately from this medicine. So we're funding and accelerating R&D for longevity therapeutics to benefit everyone. And we're doing it in an open and accessible manner. So the main points are, therapies that target aging are the future of medicine, as they tackle age-related disease at the root cause. I hope you all are bought into that. And we've noticed that the top key opinion leaders in crypto and Web3 are incredibly aligned with this new paradigm, trying to bring aging under medical control. And it kind of makes sense because both Web3, this new financial technology, as well as longevity biotech, this new paradigm to medicine, have long been dismissed by the incumbents like the government, Wall Street, NIH. And it makes sense to unite the forward thinkers economically and the forward thinkers scientifically in a native Web3 new internet type of structure, a decentralized autonomous organization. So we incubate and fund longevity research, creating more startups and therefore accelerating progress and democratizing democratizing both the advancement of and exposure to rejuvenation biotech, where this way we can scale deal flow, deploy funding, incubate the research exponentially faster than the traditional way with startups and VCs. We are open and permissionless. Anyone can contribute funds. Anyone can apply for funding. Anyone can contribute work and collaborate with us. And we're using the VITA token, the native token of VitaDao, to align incentives and enable these network effects, basically getting this unprecedented opportunity for scalability, fair evaluation and incubation, and unstoppable progress. So the problems. Drug development has been focused on treating effects instead of the cause of all chronic age-related disease, aging itself. Again, I think I'm preaching to the choir here on that aspect. And then I guess I hope none of us like to have to get on phone calls with men in suits trying to negotiate things. So IP ownership has been kind of stuck in the 20th century. It's been illiquid, difficult to transfer, with a long horizon to exit. So I'm going to show you how we are trying to solve that. Another problem, the public and patients don't have real ownership in IP. Valuable IP in universities is not investable until a startup is spun out. So there's this translation gap, this value of death. And then government grants are, you have these boring bureaucratic grant applications. They're slow. The funding can come in years. And there's this top-down approach, entrenching the status quo and being risk averse. So the solution, VitaDao and the larger decentralized science DeSci space. Of course, the main thing is a new paradigm, the geoscience paradigm. We've we've seen that aging has been reversed or slowed by up to 30% in lab animals by dozens of pharmacological interventions. So yeah, the only goal here is accelerating development so that we have a longer lifespan and health span. Otherwise, we're all heading towards decrepitude, suffering, death. And yeah, we're trying to do it in a global, super scalable way with a community that is super diverse and accessible, and it's scientist-led. We've attracted thousands of people to help us with Dealflow and due diligence and helping the applicants refine the R&D plan towards something more translatable, more valuable, mostly patentable. And we're using IP NFTs, these non-fungible tokens that can represent the legal contracts, the IP rights, these SRAs, royalty agreements, license agreements. Basically, the token, whoever is the owner of the token on the blockchain has the rights given by these legal agreements. And so we enable liquidity around these assets. We enable fractionalization so that the community can rally around a specific asset instead of having to only having exposure to a portfolio of multiple assets. And the fastest, most efficient way to advance research we found is to form a virtual biotech around the researcher from the beginning. When we can, instead of doing the research at their lab with their institution, having to negotiate for months with the TTO. Most of the time, we can just distribute the work to many labs and CROs, and the PIs can really get skin in the game and spend time on directing the research instead of bureaucracy. Ultimately, after killer experiments, the assets become investable now. There is something there that traditional VCs and even angels can invest in. It's de-risked enough, and so we already work with a few. And I think maybe even most importantly, through this community, we can make it the friendliest, best experience to serve the researcher and the research. Ultimately, I guess the medicine we all need. We have this circular model where the proceeds flow back into the treasury, scaling our impact exponentially, hopefully. We're barely a year old, and we've accomplished quite a lot. We've sourced many projects. We've funded over 15 projects. We have thousands of members and token holders. We've deployed millions of dollars with $50K to $1 million average ticket size, or the usual ticket size being around 250K. We've funded a few academic labs. We've funded more advanced startups as well that can put medicine into people soon. We can get into the specifics later. I really want to invite our researchers on the call. First, Vera Gorbunova, to say a bit more about the newest project we're incubating as a spin-out. And after that, Morten Schabay-Knudsen to talk about the oldest or the first project we funded and how we can advance these. So let's see if...
just to warn you, there's only about 5 minutes left for the slot. And so I'd love to make sure we hear from both of your teammates and the science they'd like to put forth.
Pepper, do we not go to 2 p.m. Eastern time for this? Is it 1:45?
10 minutes, okay.
Well, I'm looking at two versions of the schedule. Is it a 30-minute slot for VitaDao?
It's a 30-minute, I think.
Oh, my goodness. Well, then I sincerely apologize, by all means.
Okay, so I hope both Morten and I have 5 minutes, so I'll stick to the time.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm very excited to join VitaDao community. It's a great concept. And the first project we'll be working together on, okay, next slide, please, will be Matrix Bio. So this is the company that is built on the principle where we take mechanisms that evolved in long-lived species and now translate them to benefit human health and build treatments based on this. So we've been working on the naked mole rat for a number of years. This is an amazing organism. It's the same size as a mouse, a small rodent, but it lives up to 40 years, maybe longer. It is resistant to a variety of age-related diseases, pretty much to all of them. It very rarely gets cancer. It's resistant to cardiovascular disease, arthritis. So a number of years ago, we published a paper where we discovered that naked mole rat has increased levels of high molecular weight hyaluronic acid in its tissues. Next slide, please. So here is the slide showing naked mole rat heart, virtually filled with hyaluronic acid compared to other species, and we could add human here as well. We have some hyaluronic acid in our tissues, but very modest amount. But in the naked mole rat, there is maybe 10 times more hyaluronic acid, and it's also present in very high molecular weight form. So then we asked the question, can we benefit from this adaptation that evolved in the naked mole rat? What if we increase the level of hyaluronic acid first in the model organism, in the mouse? So we generated mice that have naked mole rat gene for hyaluronan synthesis. And very exciting, we found that these mice were longer lived. So you can see here the lifespan curve. And they also had lower cancer incidence. And in addition, they also showed various improved characteristics of physical performance and age, reduced frailty scores. So that was extremely exciting. And based on this idea, we developed a high throughput screen that allows to identify compounds that will slow down degradation of hyaluron in our body, because first we showed it for the transgenic mouse, but for humans, instead of gene therapy, we decided to pursue small molecule strategies. So we are screening for inhibitors of hyaluronidases, and this would elevate the levels of hyaluronan. So next slide, please. Here you can see that this way we can translate this evolutionary adaptation to longevity and cancer resistance that appeared in the naked mole rat. We can translate it to human using the inhibitor. So here there is one of our lead compounds. When we treat human or mouse cells with it, there is an increased level of hyaluronan. And we will use the same strategy to screen for additional compounds and test them as for cancer resistance, but ultimately we expect them to also benefit health span and lifespan. Is there another slide for me? Yes. So we are very excited. We formed a company with VitaDao, and we will perform those screens, perform lead optimization, and we are looking forward to implementing this longevity adaptation from the naked mole rat to humans.
Great. I think we're going to have questions at the end for both VitaDao, Vera's project, Matrix Bio, and Morten's project. We'll also have Tim Peterson for any more in-depth science questions. So Tim Peterson is the other longevity Dealflow steward, leading the evaluation side. He's a professor at WashU. And so if you have questions about either of these two projects or any other projects, he can also go into those. So yeah, I guess Morten, if you want to take it away and
Sure.
tell us what's been going on in the last year and so on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Laurence. So I think something is missing here in the slide. Anyway, it's I think maybe we can just start with the next slide, actually. Then we will take it slow. Okay. So I've been involved in VitaDao, I think, since the beginning. We have been very fortunate to be able to or I've been very fortunate to be able to see how the community has been growing and how everything has evolved since it started, and it's an extremely exciting community. And so the project that I will tell you about, and that was funded by VitaDao, is this idea about really it's a drug repurposing project, and the idea is to identify compounds that impact aging in humans. And so what you see here in this slide is the survival curve of a small cohort of 5 million people that is actually the Danish population. And so we have extremely good registries in Denmark. So everything you do in Denmark is monitored by Big Brother, which has some issues, of course, but there's also benefits. The benefit is that you have a huge amount of data. A huge amount of data for single, can you go back one? For single individuals, including, for example, prescription data for people taking various compounds, prescribed compounds from their doctors. That is actually registered for everybody. And in addition to this, we have access to people's healthcare records to some extent, and we know when people are born, and we know when people pass away. And so what you see in this slide here is you have the large gray line, which is the population average, and then there are all these yellow lines next to it. And each yellow line is actually a cohort of individuals that have been prescribed the same compound. And so that it's immediately clear that there are certain compounds that are associated with longevity and certain compounds that are associated with a shortened lifespan. Laurence, can you? And so one of the first ones we looked for because there's been a lot of interest in that, is metformin. Metformin has been suggested to impact aging, of course, in mice and potentially also in humans. So metformin is, of course, also highly prevalent in the Danish population. There's a lot of people that take metformin. And on the left side here, you can see the survival curve of everyone that takes metformin. So here, when you just look at everybody, people that are metformin users tend to live shorter than everybody else. However, if you look to the right and only look at people that are 70 years or older, so that's when the survival curve starts, you can see that metformin use in the elderly is actually associated with a lifespan benefit. And this occurs for the first around 10, 15 years, and then you see a shortened lifespan. So there's a lifespan benefit initially, and then there's a shortened lifespan. And if you actually look very closely on the left graph, you also see that same effect. The blue graph is actually slightly higher, but because the death rates are so low when you're young, you can't really see this difference. The point is here that you get metformin for a certain diagnosis. You get metformin because you have diabetes. Diabetes is a disease that is slow progressing and will eventually be very detrimental to your health. And so obviously, in this database, there's confounding by diagnosis. And so to avoid this diagnostic bias, we can look at individual. So each dot here in this graph here is an individual compound, and then each column is compounds that are given for the same diagnoses. So they're sort of sorted by diagnoses. And so to avoid diagnostic bias, we want to look at compounds that extend lifespan one, and then also extend lifespan compared to other compounds in the same group. So that means that you're thereby avoiding diagnostic bias. Next one. Oh, did we skip one? Or maybe we didn't. Okay. One back. No, we skipped. We're not skipping. Okay. So anyway, so we identified a number of compounds, and these formed the basis of this the longevity molecule protocol. Can you see the screen? I can't see. Okay, here. And so here we have 3 of our hits that appear to reduce probability of senescence using a deep learned senescence predictor that we have developed inside the lab. And these are, of course, molecules that are really interesting. One, because they are already FDA approved, so we know that they can actually be given to humans. And 2, we know they are positively associated with human lifespan and have a greater lifespan effect than other compounds given to the same individual. So there's a large basis, of course, of moving this into further development of potential clinical trials. And I think that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry about the problem there with the slides. I don't know. So before we get to questions, I also want to highlight a little bit, since we have a bit of time. Apart from the core focus, we've also started a bunch of side projects and nonprofit initiatives to support the field, a prize to recognize advances in longevity, starting with a hypothesis prize of $20K, with overall hundreds of thousands of funding from people like Vitalik Buterin and the Methuselah Foundation, and actually thousands of people via Gitcoin, a crowdfunding platform. And that is, I think you need to apply by the end of the year. So that's the one call to action. Another initiative we started is this Gitcoin quadratic funding round focused on longevity projects, where people can vote with their wallets on which projects deserve more of the funds given by these big philanthropists. A fellowship for people that want to apply to get started in longevity with micro grants. And I guess this coming up a deadline here soon for applying to the longevity hackathon via LongHack, organized by VitaDao. It's going to have the ideation weekend of October 28th, and then the actual hackathon on November 4th. And another call to action would be to join. We're very open and permissionless, and if you are a researcher, you can apply for funding. The deadline for the full batch is October 25th. If you know a researcher, we do pay out a bounty for referral. So, and also you can help get those evaluated and incubated. And so, yeah, if you love it and want to help, we have a lot of open roles, and people can get involved in marketing and legal and all of these various ways, as little as much as you want. So thank you. And I saw some questions in the chat, answered in the text as well, but I don't know if you can allow people to.
Well, Laurence, let me start with the questions for the from a really interesting dynamic that you have created in a really short amount of time. I'm curious, we've had a lot of dialogue in the last couple of days about really good longevity science versus a little bit of hype. And so how does VitaDao factor in or balance against good science, really, really thoughtful programs against the possibility of a bit of hostage by hype?
Well, one cool thing that I've noticed is we do put up, so we have the longevity Dealflow working group, which kind of uses these independent scientific advisory board with top experts, and they can be, no bullshit, and they're not incentivized in any way to say yes. They just give their opinion. So ultimately, there's a stamp that goes out to the community in a report, the non-confidential stuff, and then we've seen people join the governance forum. Anyone can join and comment and ask questions. We've seen top professors seemingly that have like an anonymous account, and so they're not afraid to bash a project or ask ask the tough questions, I guess. Of course, we do have the rules to kind of be constructive and all of that. But I guess that's a good way of allowing basically anyone in the world to say like, hold on, this Alzheimer's stuff doesn't make sense. Even if the top down, old people in the that are reviewing grants are not saying anything, maybe some new PI is going to be like, come on, stop this, and just comment anonymously if they're afraid on our forum. So
super. Well, if I may kind of read it back to you, it sounds like because of your platform and through the platform, you're democratizing what's getting attended to, what's getting funded, but there are guardrails to it, which is fantastic, because that's Tim.
I mean, I think one thing, I'm a traditional academic, been in academia a long time. And I think the one thing that always stands out to me is because, some people, in some cases, like Laurence said, people are anonymous. In other cases, you really don't know people's backgrounds. You don't, of course, go, Googling or, check them out on LinkedIn. And you really just kind of meet people where they are. So I think that kind of the decentralized nature of our workflow and community allows for, not kind of a hive mind, which, tends to overtake, the traditional channels. So yeah, just kind of a rephrasing what Laurence said there. Yeah.
Well, wonderful. Well, it sounds like the progress you have made in a very short amount of time is an indication of what's to come. So what is the next big step for VitaDao in this space? Because you are a unique representative of a different way to do this.
Yeah, I think it's, definitely getting, Vera's and Morton's projects, out into the, into the wild, they're a little different. Vera's is more at the beginning stages. Morton's, has a, real chance to do a clinical trial. As you mentioned, he's an MD, he runs active clinical trials. So to kind of answer Thomas's question about that, we're kind of deep in negotiations on what some of these, what could be, lead compounds and, what kind of strategy we could take there to actually make this into a real clinical trial. And, because I think that's definitely also what's missing from the space, right? In terms, like, everyone has drugs and, timelines and long horizons to get something out there. And, even if it's not a, a big financial windfall, there's still a lack of, actually proof of, kind of bona fide longevity agents, right? And so I think we could do a clinical trial. That'd be a great win for the whole community.
Wonderful. Well, I would agree. It's now 2:00. Thomas, are we ready to?
Yes, there's one last question there. So regarding Pfizer Ventures, they just applied to join VitaDao in our first institutional Genesis fundraise as a strategic member, and multiple other VCs also from the Web3 crypto side that help us with tokenomics and so on. And then we have these more biotech VCs like Pfizer and HealthSpan and so on that help us with Dealflow. So yeah, they contribute capital and they become these strategic members, and then they contribute various other things like Dealflow, tokenomics advice, governance advice, and so on. And of course, getting involved in these spin-outs and helping us even with Morton's project, right? Like helping us figure out we're going to do medchem to do a patent, or we're going to do combinations of multiple, or getting a cocktail patent basically, and so on. But yeah, more on just join our Discord, see how it works. It's fun. Hang out with us and ask all the questions you want. And
terrific. Great.
Well, thank you for the time, the whole team, and best of luck to all of you.
Thank you, everyone.